This was Pierre, one among hundreds of retired gentlemen in waiting peaceably living on their days in Moscow. What horror he would have felt if he had been told on his return from abroad 7 years ago that there was no point in searching or taxing his brains because the way forward was set for him, marked out in advance for all eternity. And it was no use fighting against it, because he was bound to turn out exactly like every other man in his position. He wouldn't have believed it. He had not put his heart and soul into so many things, setting up a republic in Russia, turning himself into another Napoleon, or a philosopher or a master strategist capable of defeating Napoleon. He had not considered it possible and highly desirable to work for the regeneration of sinful humanity and bring himself to the highest degree of perfection? Had he not gone about founding schools and hospitals and liberating his serfs? But instead of all that, here he was now, the wealthy husband of an unfaithful wife, a retired gentleman in waiting, fond of his food and drink, not averse to unbuttoning his waistcoat after dinner, and indulging in a little mild criticism of the government, a member of the Moscow English Club, and everyone's favorite on the Moscow circuit. It took him a long time to become reconciled to the idea that he was the very model of a retired Moscow gentleman in waiting, a type he had found so profoundly repellent 7 years ago. Sometimes he consoled himself with the idea that it didn't matter. This was only a passing phase, only to be struck by the horrifying thought that plenty others had gone through the same passing phase, embarking on this kind of life and joining this club with all their teeth and hair and living when they were toothless and bald. There were moments of pride when he took stock, and it seemed to him that he wasn't like them. He was somehow different from the retired gentleman in waiting. He had once despised. They were vulgar and stupid men, given to complacency, whereas I am still never satisfied. I really want to do things for humanity. As he put it, when pride came upon him. Yes, but what if all of them, these comrades of mine, also struggled like me, looking for some new original way of living, and only got as far as I have because they were beaten like me by the force of circumstances, society, breeding, a force of nature that renders man impotent. This is what he wondered when modesty came upon him. And when he had been some little time in Moscow, he lost all contempt for his companions in destiny, and even started to love them, respect them, and feel sorry for them, as he did for himself. Pierre no longer suffered for his earlier bouts of despair, disillusionment, and loathing for life, but the same sickness that had once manifested itself in acute attacks had been driven inwards, never to leave him for a single moment. What's the use of anything? What is it all about? What is going on in the world? He asked himself in great bewilderment several times a day, allowing himself to be drawn forcibly into a search for meaning in all the phenomena of existence. But experience had taught him that there weren't any answers to these questions, so he made every effort to wrench himself away from them by turning to a book, nipping down to the club, or calling in at Apollon Nikolaevich's place for a gossip. My Helen has never cared for anything but her own body, and she's now the stupidest woman in the world, thought Pierre. Yet everybody thinks she's the last word in intelligence and sophistication, and they all bow down to her. And take Napoleon, universally despised as long as he was a great man, and now he's just a pathetic clown. The Emperor Francis wants to offer him his daughter for an illegal marriage. The Spaniards go down on their knees and thank God through their Catholic clergy for victory over the French on the 14th of June. And the French, through the same Catholic clergy, go down on their knees and thank God for victory over the Spaniards on the same day, the 14th of June. My Masonic brothers take an oath in blood swearing to sacrifice everything for the neighbor, but they won't caught up a rabble when you go around collecting for the poor. And meanwhile, the Astrea Lodge sets itself against the Mama Seekers, and they squabble over some authentic Scottish carpet or a completely superfluous act which has no meaning anymore, not even for the man who wrote it. We all profess the Christian laws of forgiveness, of injuries and love for our neighbor. Laws we have honored by raising 40 times 40 churches in Moscow. But yesterday a deserter died under the knot, and it was a minister of these same laws of love and forgiveness, a priest who had given the soldier a cross to kiss before his punishment. Thoughts like this were never far from Pierre's mind, and the whole of this universally accepted hypocritical sham, for all its familiarity, astonished him each time like something new. I understand this tangled mess of hypocrisy, he thought, but how can I tell people everything I understand? I've tried, and I always find they understand it as well as I do at the bottom of their hearts, but there is something they are trying not to see. They won't see it. That, oh well, it's the way of things, I suppose. But here I am. Here am I. What can I do with myself? Thought Pierre. He had the unfortunate capacity that many men have, especially Russians, for seeing and believing in the possibility of goodness and truth, and yet seeing the evil and falsehood in life too clearly to be capable of asking any serious part in it. Every aspect of human activity he saw as bound up with evil and deception. Whatever he tried to be, whatever he decided to do, he found himself repelled by evil and falsehood, with every avenue of activity blocked off. And meanwhile, he had to live on and find things to do. It was too horrible to be ground down by life's insoluble problems. So he latched on to any old distraction that came along, just to get them out of his mind. He tried all kinds of society, drank a lot, bought pictures, built things, and most of all, he read. He read when he read and reread anything he could get his hands on. When he got home at night, he would pick up a book and start on it before his valets, and before his valets had finished undressing him, and then read himself to sleep. From sleep, he proceeded to drawing room and gossip club. From gossip to wine, women and song. From this back to more gossip, reading and wine. Wine was becoming more and more of a mental and physical necessity. He deified the doctors who warned him of that his corpulence wine was a danger to his health, and kept drinking heavily. The only time he felt good was when he had mechanically emptied several glasses of wine into his mouth. Only then he felt a pleasant sensation of warmth flowing through his whole body, along with a sentimental attachment to his fellow men, and enough wit to come out with an off-the-cuff response to any idea, as long as he didn't have to go too deeply into it. It was only after drinking a bottle or two of wine that he could vaguely accept that the horribly tangled skein of life, which had held such a terror for him, turned out to be less terrifying than he imagined. As with a ringing in his head, he chatted away, listened to people as they talked, or read dinner and supper. He couldn't get away from the sight of that tangled skein in which one aspect or another. Only under the influence of wine could he say to himself, there is nothing to it. I'll soon get that disentangled. Look, I've got the solution right here. But now is not the time. I'll sort it out later. Except later never came. Next morning at breakfast, all the old questions resurfaced, and horribly insoluble as ever. So Pierre would dive into a book with all the speed and rejoice when a visitor called. Sometimes Pierre remembered that he had been told about soldiers in a shelter under fire, with nothing to do, trying their best to keep busy, and thus make the danger easier to bear. And Pierre pictured all men as soldiers like this, escaping from life through ambition, cards, lawmaking, women, little playthings, horses, politics, sport, wine, and even government service. Everything matters, nothing matters, it's all the same. I can only escape one way or another, thought Pierre, and not see it, the terrible it.